May 18th, 1999, store shelves were docked and stocked with discs of Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace on PC. A no movie tie-in game for the film that released one day later. And if you think that is odd, oh, I have such sights to show you. For the record, we will be looking at the PS1 version of the game that released in September of that year, and I have been told that they are slightly different versions. Developed by Big Ape Studios, this game is generally looked back on with favor despite the film being heavily scorned by fans when it released. See, I was one of those kids who watched Episode 1 a few years after it released, and I thought it was so cool while also putting hours upon hours playing this game time and time again. But, that being said, I do remember very little about it, outside of the last boss in one section right in the middle of the game. So I figured for Star Wars Day, I would jump back in and I would tackle Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the movie, the game, on PS1. Part 1. Diplomacy has failed. As with the movie, we are starting off on the Federation trade ship, and we meet with a droid before being presented with an odd thing for a movie game. A dialogue choice tree pops up as the room starts to fill with gas. None of these choices make much of a difference in this moment, but that does set up some interesting ideas for later. Now, this game is fully voice acted, but if you expected Liam Neeson or Ewan McGregor, well, they aren't here. You would have had to have waited one extra day to see them in the movie that the game is based upon.
Excuse me, but I must be going.
But the voice matching is rather fine, if I do say so. And so, we gain control of Obi-Wan and need to escape the ship to Naboo. And we have tank controls to work through, baby. L1 rolls, but it is not incredibly useful. And I mean ever. R1 allows us to run, but so does using an analog stick. But just keep it in mind that the analog stick was a new addition towards the second half of the PS1 lifespan, so not all people had those kinds of controllers. Square is attack and deflect, which is important to note for a little later. X is jump and double jump. Circle is interact, and triangle is force push for the Jedi. And if you think me saying, for the Jedi, is indicative of a problem later on, then you would be correct. And so we run around the tight corridors, pushing all of the Amidala buttons in the first few rooms. Before moving on and taking out a few droids with Qui-Gon, we then get separated from Qui-Gon and then fall into the air vent maze. Well, it's not really a maze, it's a bit more of a dual-sided pathway with lock buttons. However, upon crawling through the walkways, we come upon the hangar bay, and are treated to the visuals and the pictuals of our ship getting blown up and all of the frame rate issues that come along with that. Now, getting back to the maze, down here, even though we have lightsabers, we find droids that can't be destroyed. You'll remember those lightsaber-proof vent-cleaning droids the Federation had but never used because they would just win the war? But they only move along a set path, so we only need to push 2 buttons and find our way out of this 2-hallway maze. Once out, we fight through a few more corridors alone before we find Qui-Gon out on some catwalks above the trade ship's hangar bay.
Troop transports below are leaving for Naboo. Sneak aboard one and we'll reunite on the surface.
And a few button presses. An unfortunate platform clipping death. And droid fights later, and we get to watch the FMV of the invasion of Naboo beginning. Now, the swamps are a bit more demanding of the player, as one would expect of a level 2 of a video game. Here we have droves of droids popping up as you run around trying to navigate the map with your very limited sightline, which is the first inkling that there is going to be a problem here as this game continues. See, this game does not want you to see the levels. The nearly top-down camera that is just slightly too zoomed in on you angle that keeps 90% of enemy patrols out of your line of sight while they can aggro to you off-screen is a bit of a bizarre design choice. And we'll see a lot of this later. And by later, I mean the rest of the game. And as we make our way through the level, multiple platforming segments are thrown at the player with new mechanics and no tutorials present, which does feel pretty bad given the game's janky jumping and player controls. See, it turns out that you need to be facing the exact angle of a ledge or a wire in order for you to grab them. But they will just sometimes still make you drop back down anyways. Now, outside of new additions, the visuals of the swamp are nothing spectacular, but it is a whole lot more interesting than the spaceship corridors. It is a lot of the same grid tile repeated over and over, however, with no variation. But one thing they tried to simulate are light rays coming through the canopy of the swamp, which I will say for a PS1 game is really cool to see. Finally, I will give the game props so far for not recycling the movie to fill cutscene space, as the developers actually animated and created scenes for the game specifically, whereas a lot of other movie tie-ins either take still shots or they highly compressed video footage to add in as the cutscenes. And so, with the swamp put behind us and Jar Jar leading the way, we dive on down to the Gungan City. Gungan City is nothing major, it's mostly a puzzle and platforming level as we meet with Boss Nass. Jar Jar gets imprisoned,
Broken the no come back law. He's sent to be pounded until death.
and we as Obi-Wan are sent to save Jar Jar from the prisons. And so we set off the puzzles and platforming time and time again, as I don't think you can fight the Gungans. Oh god, can you kill the Gungans? You can, in fact, ungun your Gans. This section does introduce a new mechanic for us, though. The power of suggestion is notated in dialogue choices by flashing purple options that can open up the way forward in some scenarios. And so, by doing so, we get the passkey, head down to the bottom of the level via bubble lifts and platforming sections. We free Jar Jar and get treated to a new CG cutscene of the "There's always a bigger fish" scene from the film. Sadly, there is no highly compressed voice line, so I'll add my own. There's always a bigger fish. Part 2. The Gardens of Threed. The Gardens of Threed are where my patience really started to get tested. The camera view really hinders your progress throughout this level, as it is massive, and most enemy squads will start shooting at you from a good distance off screen before you even have a chance to know they're around. And there's a lot of enemy squads on this level. No, not enemies, singular plural, squads, the plural. Health pickups are few and far between on this level, which means every bit of progress is save scum heavy. We then came across a full health pickup that was located beside either an unfortunately placed glitched out enemy or a cruelly placed joke from the developers that kills you when you get too close to it. And reloading did not solve the issue, which essentially is the equivalent of biting into a pizza roll that is too hot, burning your mouth, and then thinking that the one right next to that one will yield different results. Spoiler warning, it doesn't. Once we make it to the last little section of the level, I must say that the tank that waits for you at the end is set up to be very anti-player progression. You tell me what you think you are supposed to do here when given a thermal detonator and a rocket launcher right on the steps below the tank. Is it A, fight the tank, B, run from the tank, C, blow up the gate, or D, pull two levers that are hidden in obscure locations very out of the way of the arena? In case you are still wondering, the answer is D, as the two levers are kept out of your line of sight while the tank is constantly bombarding you with no downtime and no direction of what to do. Anyways, once you pull the levers and walk through the gate, however, the level ends and we are on to level 5. The Escort Mission. This is easily in top 10 worst levels in video game history in my books. For starters, there is the sheer amount of enemies all starting off screen that will hinder your progress all the way through. There's also the lack of HP items outside of the opening area, which has the most for the least amount of enemies for some baffling reason. While escorting the Queen, she will sometimes bump into you while you are trying to escort her and then decides to just stop moving to chastise you for stepping on her dress, prompting you to then talk to her again to get her moving, which can then lead into a loop of talk, bump, stop, chastise, talk, repeat.
When you are ready to continue, Jedi.
The Queen will also sometimes just run straight into a droid patrol with no regard for her own life. The Queen can and will also just stand around in the middle of a droid attack. On the enemy side of things, the destroyer droids are the worst enemy we have faced thus far, and there is no reliable way of dealing with them unless you get a rocket launcher and run in and out of sight lines, but that still takes about 3 to 5 rockets to deal with just one of them. The only positive that came out of this level was just me knowing that the fact that I'd never have to play this level ever again once I beat it for this video. Did we get it? Oh my god, we're done. Oh my god, we're done. Queen, come here. Amidala? Oh my god, we're done. Oh, we're done. Go. Come on. Come on. And we eventually got the Queen to the hangar and we board the ship and escaped Naboo, all thanks to Obi-Wan's hard work.
Obi-Wan!
Part 3. Weekend at Annie's. Making our way into level 6, Mos Espa, this is quite possibly the worst level in this game. I hereby take back what I said about Naboo just a tiny bit, because at least on Naboo, it was easy to understand what was happening and it was mostly a technical and skill issue on my part. This level is just a navigational nightmare, and the level where you will become fully aware of just how poorly built this game's combat system is. And that's because this level is where the game introduces boss enemies. The level can be divided into 2 phases. Step 1, find Anakin, which, it seems simple enough. We just run to the slave quarters, talk to his mother, and have Anakin lead us through the death trap that is the junkyard to find Watto's shop. And then there's Step 2, finding pod parts, which makes this much longer. See, we meet and talk with Watto, but Watto will only gamble on the pod races for the T-14 hyperdrive generator. So, we need to now help Anakin build his pod racer. And how do we do that exactly? Well, we first need to help this alien get her son back, but... Oh, hold on, where do we go to do that? Oh, that's right, we climb around on rooftops becoming Qui-Gon Auditore until we find where the child is being held prisoner. And when we try to free them, a huge beast then breaks out of a nearby cage, and we are then manhandled so much I became confused at what role I was playing in this RPG. And so after completely breaking this boss fight by cheating, it's fine, okay, the game is rough around the edges. We take the child back to his mother and they give us a pulse generator or something. Technobabble pod parts are what we need to trade for other parts and all that. We then help this guy get his apartment back. We trade this guy at the cantina for another part.
One fuel converter.
We have reached...
Hey, Anakin, I wish him luck. And don't forget to bet on me.
And can move on to the pod racing section. Onward to level 7, the Mos Espa Arena. And yes, another level that will make you hate life unless you cheese all of the bosses that show up in it. See, this level here is absolutely brutal unless you play dirty like the game does. That being said, a blaster rifle will help you out immensely here, and so that is going to be our first order of business. Acquiring a blaster rifle.
Good luck with...
So heading around the edge of the map and past this group of ruffians, we find an old Jawa ship, and if we deal with the baddies inside, we manage to get the blaster rifle to use later. And heading back to the arena gates, we talk to this Twi'lek and she leads us up to go and talk to Jabba the Hutt, who will give us entry into the arena if we broker a deal with him. Or he'll just throw us into a fighting pit for his amusement. You know, either or really works here. Now, we've said it before and we'll say it again. This game is not meant for combat. The first boss here, after getting stuck down in an arena with Jabba, where there are no breaks in the arena, it's a flat open floor plan with spiked walls, coupled with the fact that if you try to run away from the enemy, by the time you try to turn around and take some swings at it, the enemy is already halfway through a combo on you, so you might as well just take the chance on just mashing the attack button, or rather, the flail button, right in its face if you don't know the cheese strat. And so here, to easily beat the first boss, you just need to wait in front of where the boss enters the arena from, and hold both forward and the attack button to keep the boss stuck on the spike traps and quickly beat the boss from damage stacking. If it works, because it can fail, the boss can just ignore this, walk right past you, seemingly sometimes, then the fight will be over in mere seconds. We get our entrance, we locate Watto, and we place our bet on Annie before joining him down in the pod pits. And it is here where we learn that Anakin's pod is not working as the starter has been stolen by this thing. We chase this alien that stole it and wind up at the next boss, and this one is incredibly unfair as he has an energy shield that activates if you get too close to him, and it will constantly damage you if you're in its vicinity. So, the cheesy way to win this is with the blaster we picked up earlier. See, you just need to wait inside of the door frame so that the boss doesn't activate. But you can see him just fine, and you just fire away from the doorway, taking brief breaks to shoot at the blaster turrets that rise out of the floor along the way. And once defeated, we get the starter, and then we are treated to the worst possible pod racing scene we could get.
The racers are ready.
They're off.
Hurry, Master Anakin! I have a bad feeling about this.
They're coming up to the final lap. Sebulba still has the lead.
With Skywalker gaining ground. Misa no sees Annie yet.
I can't bear to watch.
Don't worry. Here he comes now.
Go, Annie! Skywalker is right behind Sebulba.
Hey, boss. What if Anakin really wins?
They won't win. Sebulba will see to that.
Coming into the last turn, Skywalker is side by side with Sebulba.
Their pod races are tangled. They're not gonna make it.
Skywalker pulls free. Sebulba has crashed.
Skywalker wins!
Let's take that hyperdrive unit from Watto and leave this planet.
Once that's done and over with, we get the generator and then we move on to the last section of this cursed planet. And it's the section that I have been waiting for since we got here. We are now on to level 8, Encounter in the Desert. And we are now prepping to leave, and this is the shortest level of this batch of 3. But this is one of 2 levels that I vividly remember from when I was playing this as a kid. We need to escort the T-14 hyperdrive generator to the Queen's ship. and we are set upon rather briskly by Darth Maul in his one-bladed lightsaber sortie. Now, just like in the movie, you can't beat Maul here. Your goal is just to survive and deal just enough damage to hit the next event trigger. This section, with the poorly thought out combat, consists of you running at Maul and slamming into him while holding the attack button, as if you were just mashing two action figures together until one's arms flew off. Now, there is a cheesy strat for this section as well, but it really only works in Phase 2. Probably. I didn't really try it in Phase 1 to find out. But after you climb over the rocks, you will be attacked by Maul yet again, and you need to keep him busy while everyone else loads onto the ship. So, what you can try to do is to fight him off, if you are confident enough in your flailing skills, or you can get him against a wall and just spam force push until the timer runs out on the fight, and you hit the cutscene. See, you do not need to let your force gauge fill all the way back up to use it again, and it will have a small pushback effect even if you just mash the button over and over. And honestly, I just remember this level being a lot of fun and playing it and replaying it as a kid so much, but as an adult and past the lens of 26 years since its release, all of my memories are seemingly just falsities being created by viewing something through rose-tinted glasses. Part 4. The Invasion of Naboo. Moving on to level 9. Coruscant. The Coruscant level is, quite honestly, just not a good time. This entire level is just padding and is not related to the story much other than creating a reason for the player to run around on Coruscant. In this level, the player is Captain Panaka, and their job is to escort the Queen. And, as from our earlier discovery, escorting the Queen and doing block puzzles while also wandering around the Coruscant sewer system equivalent is just not a great time. Do you guys remember that part of the movie where Captain Panaka gunned down homeless people in the sewers while trying to find the kidnapped Queen after landing on Coruscant? Because I don't. Again, this entire level is just padding to fill something in for the Coruscant section of the story, which in the movie was primarily just the politicking scenes before the Naboo War. You know, the things that don't really make a action platformer game that appealing. Also, at the end of the level, there is a boss. And the mercenary boss at the end of this level is the most infuriating thing quite possibly in this game. Even more so than the Beast of Mos Espa. This boss fight is already weighted against the player more from the fact that it is a melee boss that can deflect blaster rounds, and we have no melee weapon as Panaka, so there are a few ways to try and handle the situation. One, if you somehow have grenades, then please just start chucking them. They will take chunks out of them. 2, you can also try to stun lock the boss by shooting the explosive barrels littering the arena. However, they also stun and hurt you as well if you're too close. Or 3, there is what I'm going to call the moonwalking strat, in which you run at the boss until he swings at you and then you start walking backwards while firing your rifle at the boss. This will cause him to swing, then step, then swing, and about 50% of your shots will land on him. And once that boss is finally defeated, we are done with Panaka. For now. And once done with Coruscant, we move on to level 10, the final battle, part 1, where, as Padme, we are thrust into the assault of Naboo with only a taser and no other weapons as we backtrack that horrible alleyway section from Obi-Wan's levels, but in reverse. Once we hit a checkpoint, we then get switched over to Obi-Wan, and he gets to clamber his way through the dark circled platform room, which surprisingly doesn't have as much of a platforming focus as you would expect. There's really not much to say about this early part of the level that I didn't already cover in Obi-Wan's early levels, except for the fact that Panaka as an NPC is probably the most useless companion in this game for this context and ties.
Yes, Your Highness.
Moving on to level 11, the final battle part 2, Electric Boogaloo. Padme and Panaka end up storming in the castle's very open corridors filled with droids and destroyer droids and blaster turrets placed down every 10 feet in search of 3 colored card keys to open special doors and reach the Viceroy leader. I kid you not, the only way that I made it through these last 2 levels in this game was by save scumming a lot as Padme, because you just need to figure out the game's angles and abuse them just as much as the droids decide to abuse you. As Obi-Wan, we then finish the platforming section and deal with one semi-large corridor puzzle before we reach the red laser corridor from the movie and watch as Qui-Gon gets killed by Maul, now in his dual-bladed lightsaber sortie. This is all fine, except because they didn't decide to time the laser walls properly, it can look like Obi-Wan just stands around and lets Qui-Gon die alone, as the laser corridor is pretty forgiving, even in the cutscene. And then the fight commences. The fight with Darth Maul isn't terribly difficult, but if you are low on health at the start, you need to rush to one of the 2 hidden health pickups on either side of the room. In this fight, Darth Maul will use Force Lightning and throw large boxes at you, these being the only other use of the Force in this game, but otherwise his attacks aren't super damaging, surprisingly. And so, the strategy is, smack Maul with your lightsaber, heal yourself, then repeat this for 2 cycles, and he should go down. Although, using flash grenades and any bazooka rounds that you still have will help speed this process up considerably. And once Maul is dealt with, we walk over to Qui-Gon and the closing cutscene plays. Qui-Gon tells us to look after Anakin, the Naboo victory ceremony plays, including showing the Gungan parade, but strangely enough there is no cut or even a overview of the Gungan fight on Naboo during this level, so once again you are just expected to fill in the gap of that with your knowledge from the movie that didn't come out until the following day. You can then sit and watch the credits roll, which, at the end of them, the game will present you with your results screen, and in a surprise to absolutely no one, I got the lowest score on pretty much every stage but the first one, and received the rank of Padawan. So, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, the movie, the game. As far as movie tie-in games go, I'm actually going to rank it pretty high. On a game development basis, I'm going to rank it incredibly low for the time that it came out. This game does like to play with verticality quite a bit, which leads to some densely packed navigation loops in the levels. But the rendering quality and the camera system often impedes exploration, and in some areas the layout of key locations just doesn't make sense with the context of the current level, making progress feel accidental instead of earned. The combat in this game is the worst part about it, honestly. The best weapon in the game is by far the rapid-fire laser rifle, even for the Jedi, which is extremely weird and disappointing. Most enemies will begin combat from off-screen, and when every enemy is a basic droid 9 times out of 10, that means that a hail of blaster fire is already being launched at the player before the player even has a chance to know there are enemies on the same path they are on. The absence of a dedicated block button for the Jedi also is just absolutely baffling, as the deflection system just seemingly has no rhyme or reason in a one-on-one scenario, which only compounds the more enemies that get involved. The lightsaber attacks also have the weirdest hitbox of any melee attack I have ever used in a game. I understand that this is dated, but in this, you end up flailing around trying to hit a droid firing at you, and the lightsaber might decide to hit that droid that is in your face, shooting you point blank, and taking half to 3/4 of your health bar with it. All in all, the game is a pretty okay tie-in for the movie, even though it does change some events completely and adds in some non-canon scenarios. But I will caution you and say that they only really hammered on the IP's art and design scale. The mechanics that make this a game are much more in line with the archaic design scheme of making the game unbalanced so that it is artificially extended instead of there being more well-designed and paced levels. In this, you end up getting 11 levels weighted against the player, and sometimes ones that outright feel like they are fighting the player to get through them. All around in each area of the game, it excels at nothing and is mediocre at best in everything. With all of that out of the way, I'm just going to go ahead and rate this game out of 10. Friends, thank you for watching to the end of the video. It was incredibly fun to go back and relive this game once more since I hadn't played it for about 20 years, which is a wild thing that I'm able to say now. And if you did enjoy the video, remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it does help me out immensely, and you will get to see all of the other game reviews and retrospectives coming down the line, as well as whatever else we get up to over here. As always, remember to take care of yourselves, and may the Force be with you.